This perception process that we're talking about, and I told you it has 3 steps. It is really the decoding process. We're taking in symbols, we're choosing things to pay attention to, and we are making meaning out of them for ourselves. And this is a perception process. The first step in that process is selecting information that you're going to choose to pay attention to, because there are just too many things going on for us to pay attention to everything. And when I ask you, why did you make the decision that you did, you were able to tell me, well, I looked at the color of her shirt, I looked at the monogram, I looked at the shoes. Nobody said I looked at her earrings or her hair color or her hair. We just can't pay attention to everything. So we have to choose things to pay attention to. Some of the ways that we choose what we are going to pay attention to is, number 1, based on needs. If we need to answer a specific question, we are going to look for things that answer that for us. How many of you have been on a long plane trip before? Yes. If you have been on a long plane trip before, you know that by the end of the plane trip, you do not want to use the bathrooms on the plane. So as soon as you get to the airport, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you need after you get off the plane? The bathroom, yes. And so what is it that you will notice?
Restroom signs?
The restroom sign, right? You're not going to notice the Prada sign on the side of the wall in the duty-free shop. That's not what you need right now. So the thing that you select to pay attention to is based on what you need. In addition to that, we perceive or we select and pay attention to things that we expect. What do those say? First one is Paris in the springtime. It really says what? The springtime. And then the next one says once in a lifetime. And you get the picture, bird in the hand. So we expect it's going to say for the first time around Paris in the springtime, and then you're like, oh, I got this. And then you see the next one and you say once in a lifetime, because you expect the second time around that we're trying to trick you. And my confession is I knew what was coming, and the first time I looked at it, I still read Paris in the springtime. We really perceive and choose to pay attention to things that we expect. So there's an example of that. So the first step is to select what you're going to pay attention to. The next thing is to organize. So we got 3 steps in this process. Select, organize, number 2. And the way that we organize them is based on schemas. Let me pull this stuff up. There's one more. Yes. Schemas are what we would talk about as mental structures of related bits of information. And you gave us a great example. You were talking about people who are, in my mind, wear tennis shoes that are new and look like they're not expensive, but high quality. That fits into this mental model for me of people who are athletic. So that's your schema. A person who is athletic, among other things, would probably be wearing nice tennis shoes. There were some other examples here, and I'm drawing a blank. What was yours? The monogram and the Chick-fil-A. There we go. Very good. So in her experience, based on what she has seen and experienced in the past, these 2 things connect. And that is her mental model. And we all have our own mental models or schemas. They provide us patterns and instincts. So when you're in a situation and you're like, ooh, this isn't quite right, it's not really safe, you're relying upon your schemas for things that are safe and not safe. Our schemas evolve and change over time. As we experience more things, our schemas become more complex. We can take into account more variables. The less experience we have, the more simplistic our schemas are. So they evolve and change and get more complex as we grow older. But that's how we organize the things that we choose to pay attention to. Identify examples. So, you cannot read what is in the white box on the sides of these things up here. But if you were to look at it, what type of information is right here?
Nutritional information.
Nutritional information. How do you know?
Because we've looked at it a lot.
You've looked at it a lot. In your past experience, you realize your schema for nutrition information is not on the front of the rotten box, right? It's not where it belongs. It belongs on the side, and it's usually in a rectangle in specific straight lines, and it's white, and that's what that is. Yes, that's just another good example for you of what would be considered a schema. So do you guys have a handle on what the schemas are? It's the way that you categorize and put things together based on your own mental models and past experience. All right. The last part is interpreting. So you have selecting, step number 1, organizing that information according to schemas, number 2, and interpreting or making meaning as the third step in that process. So you say, I'm choosing to pay attention to the fact that Kristen has what looks to me like a flannel shirt on underneath her sweatshirt. And I'm choosing that because this crazy lady at the front of the classroom asked me to answer a question about what I think is Kristen's favorite music, and I got to find something that's going to help me answer that question. So you choose that. Then you organize that piece of information into a schema you have or mental image that you have about folks who like country music. And for you, flannel shirts, country music kind of go together. For me, because I grew up in Oregon, flannel shirts goes with the whole grunge and alternative thing. So my schema for, flannel shirts and where they fit is different than yours. We will all be different. So the idea of creating meaning at the end will be different for you than it would have been for me based on that one thing. And it's when you take those symbols and you organize them according to schema, at the end you have to come to some conclusion. That's the meaning that you make at the end. And as you guys know, that's the end of that decoding process that we already talked about. Making meaning is what we said before. We've just broken it down this time into 3 different steps. You can improve that process, and we've already talked about one way. As you experience more things, you allow your schema to grow and become more complex. You allow your picture of what a person who likes grunge music would look like to expand and include more and different things. Okay, challenges with the perception process. First one is mindlessness processing versus mindfulness. So not paying attention to the processing versus actually paying attention to what's going on. Our schemas can make us lazy, is what it boils down to. We don't really pay attention to the specific details about Kristen before we decide whether or not she's going to be in our group. We decide right away because our schema already tells us. And it takes more effort to take in and organize more information. So one of the ways that we can become better at making meaning from symbols is to actively engage in the process and allow our schemas to grow and change. Another one would be narrow perspective, limited ideas. It's really another way of saying not enough information in your schemas. And then stereotyping is what you really rely upon when you have to answer questions like what I gave you for Kristen. You don't know enough about her. You haven't had enough time to gain a lot of information. So you have to rely upon stereotypes, which is fitting others into an existing schema that you have and attributing all characteristics of the schema to that one person, and your schema doesn't change. So if you attributed to Kristen all the schema or characteristics of someone who you stereotype as liking country music based on her flannel shirt, then you would definitely be stereotyping, not allowing for all of her individual characteristics. And those could be positive, negative, or neither one, just factual. But again, they're limiting. We have to rely upon them at times, but we really need to be aware. Then your textbook goes on to talk about prejudice, which are the deep-seated feelings of unkindness and ill will toward particular groups based on our stereotypes. So not only do we put people into groups, then we give those groups characteristics and we create judgments or feelings about them, which you guys are familiar with. You understand how that works. They're usually based on negative stereotypes and feelings of superiority. We need to avoid that. I think this is the last part of it. Selective perception is a problem with that. Again, we have to choose, right? But, oh gosh, what is it? My husband jokes around all the time about selective hearing disorder, right? As a spouse, you know what that is? Selective hearing disorder. That tone in my voice that comes along when I'm nagging, it's like it creates his selective hearing disorder. So now he can't hear what I'm saying anymore. So he receives only the information that he wants to hear in that situation. And heaven knows when he starts talking about whatever first-person shooter video game that I'm like, oh, blah, 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 blah. It's selective perception. I don't care. I don't want to know. So is that a challenge with the perception process? Yes. And later on when he says, remember when I told you, I'll be like, no, yes, maybe, right? You guys get how that works. And then lastly, undue influence. That's giving another person power over our perceptions. So people can suggest to us or tell us what it is that we should be seeing, what it is that we should be noticing. Kind of like your teachers, right? And so we say, sure, I'll do that. You notice that. But we need to take responsibility for our own process. And we can have people suggest stuff to us, but we still need to be responsible ourselves for deciding what we're going to be paying attention to and what we're not. Oh, I was wrong. There's one more thing. Attributions. This is an important word for you to know. The attributions are a way of explaining other people's behaviors, why they did something, why they did not do it, and that's related to interpretation at the end. So why someone did something, why someone said something, we look at their motives, and that's called attribution. That has to do with perception. The fundamental attribution error, and if you can write down this definition, this is what comes from your textbook, but I have another slide that kind of explains it more. That error is overemphasizing internal and underestimating external causes of behavior. So when we put together our attributions or reasons for people doing things, we will put more emphasis on internal or external. And when we choose to overemphasize internal and underestimate external, that's the fundamental attribution error. I'll give you a second to write that down. Good. Now, what does that really mean? It's this idea, excuse me, that if it's good, excuse me, and it happened to me, then I did it myself. So that's an internal attribution. I did it because it was good. That makes me cool, right? It's an internal attribution. If it's bad and it happened to me, then it was the situation or somebody else's fault. He's like, yeah. If you have children, smaller brothers or sisters, no, it wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. I didn't do it, right? If it's good, it happened to me. It was my fault. I studied really hard for the test. That's why I got a good grade. If it was bad and it happened to me, it was because the teacher wrote a really hard test. So flipping that around, if it's good and it happened to somebody else, it was because of the situation and good luck. Whereas if it was bad and it happened to them, then it was their own fault. And we tend to do that. That's the fundamental attribution error and something to be aware of. Questions about that one? I think this explains it more easily. And this is where we will end for today. I know. Other questions? No? Okay, so let's talk about this quiz then that's coming up. Pull up the review document. I told you before we got started, kind of gave you the target. You needed to know the 3 steps of that perception process, and that's at the end of this. But let's talk about our communication components. You need to be able to recall and explain and provide examples of the 9 basic communication components. Who knows what I mean when I say you need to be able to recall these?
Remember them and reuse them?
Yes, remember them and reuse them. So I'm telling you right now, part of what the quiz asks you to do is list the 9 basic communication components. And that is recall. So there are different types of test questions that your teachers put together for you. Identification and definition. So that's where the word's there and you get to choose it. You identify it from a list. Another one would be recall. That means it has to be up here in your own mind. You have to recall it from there and put it on a piece of paper. And then we have application questions, which are the kind that ask you to provide an example of the concept. The last one is synthesis, where they take 2 different concepts and put them together and ask you to compare them. So this level, I'm asking you to recall, explain, and provide examples. And then there are your 9 basic components. Now this is like what you did in class already. You said the sender was this person, the channel was this, the receiver was that. Those are examples. That's what I'm asking you to do. It is very much like the activity that we did in class with the candy. So if you wanted to practice that, that would be a good idea. Next one. Be able to explain what is meant by the idea that communication is a product. And we had some really good examples of that in here. The training at the restaurant with the hot dog, that really treated communication as a product because the whole point was at the end, you need to be trained well. You need to have received and understood this message that I have sent. And how it got there really doesn't matter. You just need to be able to make the hot dog correctly. That's looking at communication as product. And then communication as process was very much our other ones, where we had multiple senders and problems with the encoding and problems with decoding because we had an international soccer team and everybody didn't speak the same language. That's all communication as process, problems with the process or strengths within the process. Okay, and again, the communication or the candy thing, you should be able to look at a model and say, and again, it's not always, one or the other, but you can say, this really looks at process because, and tell me that we focused on the context and we focused on encoding and decoding. As long as you can make an argument and use those terms and explain why you think it is what it is, then you'll be fine. Lastly, you should be able to recall and provide examples of the 3 steps of the perception process. So our 3 steps are what? 1 is
select.
Select, very good. 2 is organize, and 3 is interpret. Yes, very good. And that it's not meant to be tricky, but sometimes that if there's one thing on this quiz that people forget, it's that one. It's the select, organize, and interpret. So I'm telling you now, don't forget, select, organize, interpret. And then you should be able to look at your own experience and identify how you have used the process to make a decision, much like the activity that we did in class. I decided that her favorite hobby was playing sports because I noticed her tennis shoes, and to me that fit into the schema of what sports enthusiast would be, so I decided she likes sports. There you go. That's what we're looking at. Questions about that? This is also on D2L. I put it up there last night, so it's available to you. No? All right. One more thing. I'm going to put a bug in your ear before you leave today. On Friday, after we do the quiz, I'll begin the very beginning of talking about public speaking. And in this class, what we do is some theory stuff, and then we'll do some public speaking, and we'll go back and do some more theory stuff and some public speaking, and we alternate back and forth. But on Friday, I'll begin to discuss that. And your first speech, when it rolls around, is going to be an informative speech. And I'm just going to tell you kind of what your topic choices would be now, so you can begin thinking about that, letting that rattle around in your brain up there. It's an informative speech, so you're not trying to convince us of something necessarily, but to inform us about something that you believe or a topic that you like. And when I do an informative speech, I find that, especially in the beginning of the semester, sometimes choosing a big, important topic is really overwhelming, and people just would prefer not to talk about something major and serious. So for us, when I say informative, you're welcome to inform us about a topic of your choice of any kind, if you would like, but we can make it smaller too, and you can inform us about either a simple pleasure that you have or a guilty pleasure. The other day, someone was talking about, what was it? One of those silly reality TV shows that she loved, and she's like, I hate to say it, it's total guilty pleasure, but I love watching this. So you might inform us about something that is a simple pleasure, excuse me, or a guilty pleasure that you have and why you like it. The other thing, to make it smaller, is if you have a pet peeve, something that bothers you, you can tell us about that. And a pet peeve in terms of informing, it bothers me to no end when people drive slowly in the left lane on the highway, and give us the 3 reasons that it bothers you. So again, when we're talking about an informative speech, you can look at something like a simple pleasure or a pet peeve, or you can look at something more traditional. Like I had last semester, someone talked about growing mushrooms. But again, and part of the whole informative speech was telling us what type of mushrooms that he was discussing, and then was able to go on. But that's a topic that you might not necessarily think. You could inform us about, had someone inform us about the Electoral College and how it actually works. It doesn't matter. Anything is up to you in that whole spectrum. So if you want to choose something big and important to you to talk to us about, you can. Or if you want to make it smaller and not so overwhelming, you can choose a pet peeve. Usually people can talk for a few minutes about something that's a pet peeve that drives them nuts. Okay. And again, you're not going to be required to submit your topic for a while, but I want to give that to you so you can start thinking about something that might be of interest. Questions? No? All right, let me take attendance, and then I'll send you on your way. All right. Okay, I happen to know that both Tylers are here, but I don't know which Tyler is which. Which is Tyler Albright? Okay. And Jessica, we know, is here. And Michaela, yes, I was close. And Nick is in front of me here. And Jasmine, she was back there though, right? Okay. Oh, and I let you sit down because I was thinking you were the one that had the crutches. So busted, Vicky. I remember your name. All right. Thomas. Okay. We We know that the other Tyler is here then. And Kathleen, I know actually that she is not here. Matt. All right. And Kristen, we know is here. And Robert Law, we know is here. And Eric. Okay. And Destiny. Is that right? Okay. And Britt. And Mara, right? And Will is in the front. Will is.
I'm Gavin.
Okay, Gavin. Sorry. Gavin, where you sit, I'm just telling you this, there's a shadow that goes completely over your face, so I could run into you in the grocery store and I would have no idea who you are. So if that happens, don't take it personally. I can only see your silhouette.
That's okay.
Okay, so and then Will, and then Elena is back there. Ethan? No. And Shasta? All right. Awesome. So I will see you all on Friday. If you have questions, pardon? Tuesday. Oh, heck. Tuesday. I cannot keep track of the days of the week. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. That gives you more time to study. I was thinking. All right. Don't save.
I think skip my name.
It's not on here.
Okay, so probably it's new one.
And that would be why. Okay. Oliver. And it was when Che?
Yeah, Wei Chen, yeah, W-E-I-C-H-E-N.
And what's your last name?
C-H-N-G.
Okay. That's because it's not on this printout. So I will print this out. Wait, before you leave, let me make sure that. Have you seen this class on your D2L already?
Yeah,
They
sure.
did get the registration completed.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
good. All right, that's all I wanted to check. So if you've seen it, then we're in good shape. All right. Thank you for doing
thank you
that
so
and letting
much,
me
yeah.
know.
So I'm talking about quiz. The quiz will be next tomorrow. Start tomorrow
On Tuesday.
on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
Okay, so
I
in a
kept
class.
saying Friday. Yes, it's in class on Tuesday. I didn't.
I hope I can handle it. Yeah.
You'll be fine. I promise. Just study and you'll be fine.
So should I buy a book?
Yes. Have you? You've not purchased it yet?
Yeah. So do you know which book I should buy?
Yes. Let me show you. Hold on one second. This is our course website. Have you been here
yes.
yet? Okay. Go to the content, and then on the syllabus, the second page has the
Information about the book.
information about the book, including the ISBN number. So I'll pull it up, and you have your phone. If you want to take a picture of that, you're welcome to do that too. Sometimes that's easier.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll order now. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good afternoon.